Welcome to Culture Clash Parenting, the podcast where laughter meets learning on the wild ride of raising kids in foreign lands. Join us, two Atlantic crossing moms with over a decade of parenting wisdom now under our belts. From navigating language barriers to blending traditions, we've got you covered with heartwarming tales and practical tips. If you're a parent far from home, feeling exhausted from juggling multiple cultures, or maybe you're eyeing that international move but feeling a bit daunted, you're in the right place. We're here to sprinkle some joy, share some laughs, and remind you that you're not alone on this adventure. So settle in, grab a cup of tea or wine, no judgment, and join us as we navigate the intricacies of parenting in a world that's anything but familiar. Get ready for a dose of empathy, a dash of humor, and a whole lot of love. Let's dive into this beautiful mess of raising kids in a different culture together.
Hi, and welcome to episode 7. No, 8? We're on 8 already. Woo! New year. And we will be talking about school life, specifically middle and high school in Europe versus the United States. Now that the winter holidays are over, well, except for, Nutella Day, Chandeleur, that's still coming up in France at the beginning of next month. We spoke about this in a couple of episodes ago. We will begin our series of everyday observations that frankly made us want to start this podcast in the first place. And what starts after the winter holidays? Work and school. School started back up everywhere this week. Some of us were a bit delayed. Hello, major Midwestern snowstorm here. But Marissa's boys started right on time last Monday. One of them directly with a test. First day back, first hour back, test. I think you said 9 a.m. on Monday, right, Marissa?
8 a.m. on Monday.
Oh, 8 a.m. Yes, there you go.
Yeah, not a happy camper.
But yeah, let's open up the conversation about what's the most recent thing that you've observed about being different living in France versus what you had experienced yourself in the United States, Marissa?
So they do this thing here, this conseil de classe, where before they release the report cards, and they do this starting in collège and it goes all the way through lycée. Before they before they release the report cards, all of the teachers of the class, the two class representatives of the class, and then two parent representatives from the PTA all get together in a meeting with the principal or vice principal, and they go through every single child and how every single child is doing in each discipline. And they decide as a group whether what they call them félicitations, what compliments to give the kids. So if they're going to get honor roll or just good job. Right? We're not going to give you honor roll, but you're working really hard. Keep it up.
A for effort.
Yeah. They call it encouragement. Who are you encouraging? And then or if they need to follow up with the family, the kid, they mise en garde. So kind of
right.
whether they need to
put on probation almost.
Yeah. And there's different types of mise en garde, for work or for behavior. And they go through each kid and they have, which I actually think is amazing, because the entire team of teachers who have all these other classes and probably don't have very much time to meet to meet together to talk about each individual class, are talking about it and deciding, having conversations about what they know. And then the kids are there to talk about their experience, and the parents are there to say what the parents have heard from their children at home, or what their concerns are. And they do this every semester at the end of the semester before releasing the report cards. And and we've talked about this before on this podcast, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again. There are a lot of things that I think do not go are not in alignment with my values in the French education system. But this one, I'm just like, oh, this is amazing because you really get to see how much the teachers know and don't know and how much they care about the students and like their orientation, like their path. And the ones who like are struggling, like what they're doing to try and help them, even if it doesn't help, like that they're aware of it and that they're trying to to support those students in getting the help they need. And but it takes a ton of time because it's like if you're on the PTA and you're on the parent representatives, like it's every class for separately in each grade. So in Zachary's school, there's 19 classes in the four grades. And I only
And
have
that's
to I'm doing four of those 19 classes, and Sean did one. And at
I
Owen School,
wonder,
we haven't done any.
just for anyone in the US that's listening, and even in Germany, I don't know if everybody knows what college and lycée actually entails. So um,
Oh yeah.
give
It's
the classes. What years are we talking about?
so we're talking sixth to 12th grade. So college is middle school and it's sixth grade through ninth grade. And then lycée is high school and it's 10th through 12th.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, in Germany we would have it in 9 years. Unterstufe, like under step, Mittelstufe, middle step, and then upper Stufe, upper step, Oberstufe. So it's like fifth through seventh, and then eighth through 10th, and then 11th through 13th.
so it's so funny because so first of all, those names are hilarious and I love that it stops.
Steps.
Yeah. And also it's funny having moved here because growing up in New York, like where I went to elementary school through high school, and a lot of the programs in the places that I lived were like K through 12, or it was like K through 5 and then 6 through 8 and 9 through 12, right? So it was like these sort of very different like they organize the kids differently and the schools differently. But one of the things that um the school that I went to that growing up was very close to the lycée français. And so I was like, oh, school in French is lycée, like because it was a K through 12, right? And then I started to learn French and I was like, wait, lycée is high school? Then why is that school called lycée français? Like, and then we moved here and I was like, wait, collège, which is spelled college with an
Yeah,
accent on it.
but it's not the same
Middle
as
school.
after lycée.
And so it's one of like we talked like our the first in the second episode of the Faux Amis, like I feel like for me college and college are a huge faux amis. And then just because I knew the lycée français in New York City, I feel like lycée feels like a faux ami, even though it's the same word because it was just used in two different ways in the same language in two different countries.
Well,
Um,
like college and college, or kindergarten in America and kindergarten in Germany, or jardin d'enfants,
yes.
because kindergarten in Germany is actually preschool, but then preschool is actually the year of kindergarten at age 5. So, yeah, and we could probably go on and on about those differences. I there's one more that I was just thinking of, the study. Like, to study here, kids in elementary school, they study for their exams. In Germany and in France as well, they étudier or studieren, that's at university. You know, like,
Oh yeah. They have yeah.
yeah,
Their homework
you
is
learn something. Yeah, in German, it's lernen, and or was it apprendre quelque chose? It's not.
yeah.
Yeah,
And they
you're
say
not
réviser, like what they have to do in France is
réviser. Yeah,
revise is the
right.
language they use. And part of that is because at least through collège, they're not supposed to get new things to do for homework. They're supposed to revise what they learned in the classroom.
Mhm.
And that right and which kind of makes sense because it's the education system. Like they should be teaching the kids what they need to know, and then the kids should be coming home to learn what they learned in the class. And
Yeah,
for sure, sometimes like they didn't get to it. And so every now and then, like Zach will get something or Owen would get something that they didn't get to in class, but they were supposed to have gotten to in class. And so it's given as a révision, but uh yeah, like that's how I hear them talk about their étudier, their reviser, they're revising the work they learned in the class. They're not studying it.
Yeah,
And
and I have like adult students in German class who will be like, "Oh yeah, das habe ich studiert," and I'm like, "Okay, so you went to university for this?" And they're like, "No, no, no. I mean, like back in sixth grade." Like, no, no, no. Then you didn't study. But
well, and even homework, like homework is devoir, like it's
Mhm.
like must do.
Must do. Tell that to American students.
Yeah.
What?
And even the word homework, like it's the work to do at home, which in my head again would like imply that they're not learning it in school. They're taking schoolwork home to learn to do it at home. And I'm not saying that's what the system does, right? It's just like when you break down the word into what it means, and if you just heard homework for the first time, you probably wouldn't, as a French person, and probably as a German person too, you can tell me if like I'm wrong. I like wait, kids do homework? Like, because it feels like something that adults, like you bring your work home from work to do at home,
Oh.
or you work from home. I don't know. That just always felt like after we moved here and I started thinking about like, oh, devoir, like must do. Like that makes sense. This is
Well,
a
in
study.
German it is in German it is Hausaufgaben. So home or house exercises or problems, house problems that you have to solve. No.
So it's probably I wonder if the word homework came from Germany, like from the German, right? We always like one of the things I love about you and what and like the things we talk about offline is like how English was such a hard language to learn because I remember you telling me this once, like how many different like how many different languages are involved? It like you told me this
Oh,
years ago and I forget the number, but it's like a lot of different languages.
language that played into creating English.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, one is still from coming from Latin, but German and English went one way, whereas all the Romance languages went a different way. But still, they play into it due to history. And in America, then the people immigrating from the South speaking Spanish plays into the language as well in a lot of ways. Whereas not just the French, like in Great Britain, where they conquered a little bit and
Yeah. Or vice versa,
um,
like here where my kids only learn British English. And then now that they're learning American English, because for some reason that's kind of like starting to come into their English language classes, they're like they're like, wait, that's not the word we learned for this thing. It's like, yes, because now you're doing American English, not British English.
they did have that set up. And at least back when I went to school, the English um, books that we had every year, because I took English from fifth through 13th grade, and you can decide whether you start with English in fifth grade or Latin. But I started with English, so I had English the entire time. But the first book um, was all Britain and Europe, and then the second book as well. And I think the fourth book was about, so like by ninth grade, it was about the US. And so then a little bit of American English played into it, but more like, oh, hey, here's what Americans say about it, but don't use it. If you, I
Exactly.
had an English teacher from New Zealand who literally wrote everything because I had been to the US and I had spoken, I obviously thought that was the cool way to speak English, and not, I kind of thought that British English sounded a little uppity. And so I tried to speak more American English, and she would write on my tests when I said, maybe this is this. And she's like, perhaps, please. And it would say it in big red letters next to it.
Yeah, perhaps. I love that. Um,
Right.
yeah,
There are definitely, we'll have a whole different episode on American English versus British English for all our European listeners.
totally. The faux ami. Uh, yeah.
But I did want to get back to your first question. You started this with, I don't know if you do this in the US, where the PTA gets together with the teachers and you go through every single student. No, 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 no. Can you imagine all the Karens on the PTA? My child gets discussed with anyone else. Now, this is my child. I no, that
Even
would not fly.
student, like as a student having gone through the US system, I think it would have made, I mean, it's interesting because one of the things I like about it as a parent is it is an opportunity, even if it's only twice a year, for every single teacher who has the kid to talk about the kid together. Right? Like they could do it in like a meeting, and maybe in America or other places they do, and
Oh,
parents,
actually,
right? Um, but especially like in a school where there's like where the staff is going to follow the kids, right? So like Zach is now in quatrième in eighth grade, and so he's had a couple of teachers at least twice, if not three times. And so they know him and they can share that information with the teachers that have him the first time. But um, what's interesting is that I think it also speaks to just how much the teachers are doing each and every day that they can't have these conversations, that they had to like create a system in which like we're going to get together once a year and do this because, and I see this when I'm as a parent representative watching what's happening and shocked sometimes that the teachers, especially the first time I did this, like shocked that the teachers didn't know. There was one kid in particular who was and who is an asylum seeker. His family's and are refugees here, and some of the teachers didn't know because he had been at another school first and had come in, and so they weren't aware of the familial situation, which the school was aware of, and it was in the kid's dossier, right, in his records. But the teachers have 500 kids, and so they don't have the time to review each and every record. And being able to do it in this environment where everyone can share is like making sure that everyone's on the same page. And so I'm curious for any listener who works in a school system, uh, how this is done there, because I think it was created here in France so that there was this like on the calendar day where they have this conversation, and I imagine that there's some version of that in every school district. um but yeah, like as a kid I never saw that happen, and obviously I was never a parent in America. I definitely can't imagine parents being happy about other parents hearing. um
how your kid is doing?
yeah,
No.
and especially like the first year I went, so this is my third year doing it. The first year I was in, I think I went to Owens and Sean went to Zach's, or the other way around. Um, but one of us went to each kid. And the second year, I was like, I don't actually want to be in the classroom where they're talking about my kid. Like, I'll volunteer for other classes, but I don't want to volunteer for the classroom that my kid is in. Because I knew that it was going to be really hard for me to sit and listen to them talk about my child and not get defensive, right? Not like be like, well, let me tell you. Um,
That's
and
funny.
then this year, Zachary is the student representative for his class. And so he has to be at the meeting. And he asked me to be the parent representative for his class. Um, And so, and I thought it was, I thought he was joking at first. And then he was like, no, really, I want you there. And I was like, okay. And I think part of it is because it's the first, I mean, I'm just projecting on my child, but I think it's the first time he's gone through it. And so he doesn't know what to expect. And I think he was like, oh, here's this friendly face that's going to be in the classroom when the teachers start talking about me. And so I told him, I was like, you don't like, they actually let the children leave when they're talking about them. They don't make you stay there and listen to them talk about you if you don't want to. And he was like, okay. And then he's like, I want to hear what they have to say about me. And I was like, okay, but you can't defend yourself. The two of us are gonna have to look at each other and just be like, like bite our tongues.
That's funny. That is exactly the opposite of how I would approach it. Because we walk into a parent teacher conference, especially where one of our children is concerned, and we're like, "What did he do now?"
Yeah.
So tell me, what is it?
Well, I think it's that though. Like if it was a parent teacher conference and it was one-on-one, yeah, for sure. Like it's the whole like you're the one parent of this your child and all of your child's teachers are sitting there and the principal of the school and another parent who's like right in my head I'm like oh they're judging me. I'd much rather not be in that room when they judge me for how my child is behaving in class.
I think
um
they're probably just grateful to have a PTA member sitting there and like have somebody volunteer for that job.
oh yeah, well I mean here it's like it's really freaking crazy. Like you like there have to be 12 members, six who are like titulaires, who are like the representatives, and then six suppléants, six like supplements. And for each committee, there's like a requirement of how many parents have to be there. And for sure, like sometimes you're like, oh, I can't make it. But because there's 12 of us, you're going to get to that number somehow. And yeah, it's really kind of crazy.
It's like a jury in court.
Totally.
You always need 12 on the jury.
And in our school, they even speaking of that, like they even have like the plaque, they print out like the plaque with your name on it. And so like you show up for the meeting. It's like we've decided that you're sitting here. Like the parent representatives are over here with like all of their names like in front of them. And the teachers are over there and the administration's over there and everybody has their name tag in front of them. And it's like, okay. Um, but yeah, I just think it's a really interesting because I think as a parent, one of the things that I was concerned about, because it was one of the ways that the things that I was conscious of as a student was I didn't want my kid to get lost in the crowd. And right, like I chose to go to a small liberal arts college because I didn't want to sit in a classroom with 3,000 or 300 other students. And and so getting to see how, and then being in like grad school and being a TA and seeing how like the professors were like, I'm going to ask my TA to know these 25 students because there's no way I'm going to learn the names of all 300. Um, it just, yeah, it just really kind of refreshed for me or like that, or made me feel calmer because I was like, okay, like they all really do know my kid um and they really do care and they really are invested um and the kids who are struggling like they really want to help them too. And so then what's my like I can't control what happens in the classroom or what happens in school, but now that I'm seeing that, I know how to help my kid better to integrate. And I would hope that other parents would who volunteered would feel the same way, right? Like, okay, like I know what the teachers need, and at home my kid tells me this thing, and maybe it's not the whole story because when I go to these meetings and I hear the teacher side of the story, I'm like, my kid's not perfect. Like my kid's story is not the way that it actually happened. That's not why he got that grade on that test. Right? Like when he's like, oh, it's because this it was a dumb question. And the teacher's like, it wasn't. Like he just
No,
didn't.
that question has been talked about. He should have known this.
Yeah, because we don't get to see the tests. Like the tests don't come back. So we don't get to review them. And so this is a way for us to kind of be able to have those conversations on a global scale. And then these conseils de classe, you hear them talk about each kid. Um, yeah. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you because that's my week this week. We're back to school. So I have 4 of these meetings, 1 tomorrow and 3 next week. And Sean had 1 this week. And there's so it's like this week and next week is all just from 5 to 7. There's these meetings going on at school.
So
Yeah.
you gotta run.
No, I'm not on today. Like, like, no, I'm only doing the class with my kid and then three other classes where I don't know any of the kids, not even the grade that my kid is in. So, yeah, they'll be, it'll be completely objective.
But that's definitely an interesting concept. I have not heard about this in Germany either. That's no, we had parent teacher conferences, and I know when Hansi was there last year, I went over for a parent teacher conference, and her aunt said the one in the spring. There was always one in the fall and the spring, but that's it. But you signed up for them ahead of time, and you got your 10 minutes with the teacher or whatever.
Yeah.
But there,
Yeah, we have those
I
too.
know they had teacher conferences where all the teachers get together and talk about each of their students, but they don't, and they do that here too. But definitely not with parents involved. I don't think I don't think any of the parents here would like it.
And not with students involved, because I think that's the interesting thing too, is they want to hear the kids' reflections on the dynamic of the class.
Yeah, we don't even have a class speaker in the US. We always did in Germany until 10th grade. And then afterwards it was the Stufensprecher, the step speaker. So like for the 11th grade, there was a great speaker, but obviously there was a lot more. There was like 120 students then as opposed to 25 or 30. Um, but even they were not involved back then, and I'm sure they are definitely not now because all those rules are much stricter. And certainly the kids are not supposed to, in 8th grade, they're not mature enough to handle everybody else's problems. They can't even handle their own generally. So I don't know if that would fly anywhere, but where the system is set up to train them for that and help them through it. Like,
So that's part of that's another thing that they do that I hadn't thought of before, but the kids are taking notes on every single kid as they're talking through them so that like a couple of times I've been in meetings where the teacher will say, when you talk to the class and you talk to this person, tell them this thing. Like, especially around like the like encouragement, right? Like they would have gotten a felicitation if they would have gotten high like
right.
honor roll if they hadn't if they stopped being so chatty in class. Like, and they were more like they paid better attention, right? Like that's why they're not like they're too chatty, and so like we're not giving them a felicitation. So their grades are really good, but their behavior is why they didn't get the role. And it's the responsibility of the class delegate, the class delegates, to go to their classmates and say, like, this is why, like, this is what happened at that meeting. And if any kid has questions about themselves, they ask the delegate, not the teacher. So it's putting a lot of responsibility
Yeah,
on on
on
the
the delegate.
student. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the delegate is a popularity contest, especially in college,
Middle
right?
school,
Like
yeah.
in middle school. So it's like not necessarily like the most
Thankful job.
not the most thankful job, but also like it's not the most um like dedicated or serious student who has the position. It's like the class who the class voted to have the position.
And that's what the class speaker is in Germany, the
Yeah.
class speaker or grade speaker, however you want to call them.
So that's back to school January in France. That's what's happening in back to school January, in back to school in January in France in my life.
But
What's
those
happening back to school January in your life? In,
we here had an extended winter break.
oh yeah,
And
you had the snowstorms.
yes, so our kids did not go back the first week. They went back for like the Thursday, and then Friday was off again because more snow was coming in. So it was really pointless to ever even open the school. Um,
Oh,
And the little one didn't even go back till Monday to preschool. And I'm sure there was that Thursday was a lot of just talking about, oh, look at the pretty snow starting to come back down. I'm pretty sure nobody worked, neither the students nor the teacher.
No tests. I like Zach
Oh,
had
God,
tests
no.
all week last week. I told you, like first day back, Zach had a test at first class, 8 a.m. Monday. He had a test. Owen had tests all last week and has tests, a couple tests this week. They just were like, we're jumping right in. New semester.
Yeah, that's what Hansi told me about the year that she was in Germany. And I remember it like that, obviously. And we did not have a new semester. It was the new semester in Germany doesn't start until the end of January. And I don't think it does here either. I don't know. No, I think the semester was over at the end of December, and they've got new classes now and new grades because they did get report cards by Christmas. But um, but yeah, in Germany, you don't even get a report card until sometime towards the end of January, which is when the new semester then starts.
Yeah. That's
So,
how it is for collège. Like I said, this is the conseil de classe 2 weeks, and then we'll get Zach's report card the last week of January. Um, but for Owen, we got his report card at the end of December. And I, but I think for them it's different in lycée here because, and I'll have to ask my kids to confirm, but I think part of the difference is like they have the bac exam. And so they get out of school like a whole month earlier. Like they get out in June so that they can study for the exam, which is mid to late June. Those who are taking it. So basically, after like the first week of June, they're pretty much done. So I think that's why they get their, it's still semesters, but their report card comes out earlier um, because they have to like put it into the electronic systems if they're gonna, if they're in their last year so that they can apply to university.
so the year before, Owen wouldn't have gotten the report cards in December, maybe. I
So
don't know. In Germany,
it's always been in December, but I think it's like because that's the time where the teachers are like, we have to have the grades done for the terminal kids.
okay.
So we're gonna do it for the première and the seconde kids. I don't know. Again, I've never worked in the lycée system. I've worked in maternelle,
Elementary, right?
primaire, and
Right.
collège teaching yoga. So this, like, I really have no, I have no idea. And I have a child who doesn't inform me when I ask the questions. So I would have
Okay.
to do my own research, which I have learned like is not a top priority for me right now with all the other things I have on my to-do list. And that to learn it for 3 years and then it's probably going to change because everything in France is changing. Like every new, uh, we've had like I don't even know how many prime ministers in the last the last year, and how many ministers of education. Like it just feels like there's just constant reform that's changing right now. And so I'm like, I'm not going to learn a system that's going to be different next year. I'm just
At,
going to
le-
try
at
my
least you're continuing to have a Department of Education and a minister
yes.
for it.
I'm not sure we're that far. Uh, I'm not sure a lot of French teachers would agree that there is a Department of Education right now, but um,
In Germany, it's all like state-based too. Like every state has their own Department of Education. They did at some point. This was back when I went to school, but at some point they got like a central Abitur, kind of like the bac, where everybody across the nation takes the same exam. I don't know if they still do that. I'd have to check into that. Now that I don't have anybody graduating from there, I haven't
yeah.
really done much research on that. But when I went to school, no, and that's why an Abitur or the high school diploma from certain states was worth more than the one from other states because it was very much clear that yes, um, that department from this state is not quite up to par, considering that this other department was great. And like back when I went to school, I think the people that graduated from like a Bavarian boarding school were the ones with the best Abitur or something. They were also the ones where the parents had a lot of money. So I don't know if that correlates.
I think this is a really interesting conversation too, because so one of the conversations that we're having, because Owen's in 11th grade, right, obviously is like university. And to the point that you're making, like if you everything that oh, and I think this is part of the reason why I'm also not I haven't fully invested in learning the system because it Owen isn't set on staying in France. Like he's actually pretty sure he doesn't want to stay in France for university. He might change his mind, right? Like he's got a year and a
He's got
half.
another year.
Yeah, but like, but right, but that's a big part of what he's considering, right? In his own sort of understanding of the system is this system is designed for people who are going to stay in the system, right? So the steps that he has to take now, um, the grades he has to get, the tests that he has to take, and his, whether he gets like high honors on the back or, normal honors or no honors only matters if he stays in France. Otherwise, it's just like you passed high school, congratulations. Here's like your entrance to a school someplace else, right? Like nobody else outside of France, or very few people outside of France, are going to know that he goes to a science and engineering program in Bordeaux. That's the best science and engineering program in Bordeaux. Like they're just going to be like, okay, you got your back in these 7 subjects. Like, good job. And your math scores are higher than your French scores because clearly like math more than like French grammar. Um, and it sounds like what you're saying is like similar in Germany, like you having left Germany for university, like
Because my grades weren't high enough. I got my Abitur, but it was a very, very low grade point average. And I would have had to, in order to study business, which I wanted to do in Germany, which everybody else also wanted to do. So they had a numerus clausus like on it, which meant you had to have a certain GPA in order to be accepted into it. Once people with my GPA had to wait, I think my wait time was like 5 semesters or something. I'm like, what am I going to do for 2.5 years? So I tried some other avenues that I was interested in, but again, that was not something I had already trained for. So in order to, for instance, in order to study sports in Germany, at there are two big universities, or at least were back then, where if you got your diploma in sports from there, that was the best thing ever, like best thing since sliced bread. And you had to do an entrance exam if you didn't have PE as an AP class in 11th and in a 12th and 13th grade. If you did, you didn't even have to take the entrance exam. But if you didn't, you had to do this the whole day of exam where you had to I don't know, play tennis or badminton or and do 3 or 4 different disciplines in track and field and do gymnastics and swim and run in the end and do a bunch of other things. And and
you're
one was
like
in
training
France
for the
too.
Olympics in one day.
Oh my God, you had like I actually trained for it and I still didn't pass it because by the end of the day, yeah, my shot put was just not enough. I don't know. Just
But I think this is something that, like, in the conversations that I have often with friends who were raised in a system and their kids are in that system, whether it's French friends whose kids are in the French system or American friends whose kids are in the American system, there's like you already have an idea of what your kid's trajectory is going to be and what it looks like because it was your experience. And so it's not always obvious that your kid might want to go outside the system or you're like or if your kid doesn't follow like isn't doesn't have this a great GPA but passes the baccalaureate, that they can go someplace else, right? Like those kinds of like of options, like it stays very small. And so like I mean, I just even remember both my parents went to a state university of New York, went to university at the State University of New York. So they were shocked when I started applying and wanted to apply to universities outside of New York.
And
Let
small liberal
alone
arts
private
colleges at
universities.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Let alone small colleges and private colleges and that kind of stuff, right? And they encouraged me. It wasn't like they were like, no, but in New York State, we have the Regent exam, and the Regent exam only matters if you go to State University of New York. And so I just remember like my dad, being like, well, aren't you studying for the Regents? And I was like, why? Like, and not to kind of be an ass about it, but because I was like, the Regents only matter if I go to a state university or a city University of New York school. And I trust, because I'm going to be compared to all the kids in New York State, that I will do well enough to get into those schools, like without having to study more. So I'm going to focus on the things that are going to help me get to the schools I want to go to, which were like at that time the SAT twos and the APs and that kind of stuff, right? Um, but like I get it was like, and so it happens, I think, just naturally, that like the fact that I'm not a French parent and I didn't go through the French high school system, or the middle school system that led to the high school system, like having conversations with my kid when he's like, I don't really want to do this path that they're telling me is kind of the normal path for me to go into if I'm in science, if I'm interested in engineering. Like his mentors, like his advisors don't understand that. And like another French parent probably wouldn't understand it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. And sure, like study for your back. Like I expect you to do the best you can do. And also, you're clearly going to university. It just may or may not be in France, right? Like that's not the option isn't do you go to university? It's just where do you go to university? And it sounds like it was somewhat similar in, because I know that like anywhere else he goes outside of France is not going to care what his GPA is, or like they're just going to care more about did he pass and his letter of motivation and like, does he fill the quota that they have of international students?
Well, and especially how much they charge is if you can pay for it.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
That was how I got my degrees.
yeah, yeah. I can pay for it. Sure, come on in. So yeah, I think that's something that I notice more and more in the conversations that I have is people are shocked sometimes at how many questions I ask because they just assume I know because they forget that
You're not from there.
that I'm not from, they don't forget that I'm not French, but they forget that like they expect that I wouldn't, I don't know, like through osmosis or something that it would come in. So like I'm like, how am I supposed to know if I don't ask questions? Um, but they're also like they're shocked when we're like, well, like there's this other, we're not as concerned about whether he goes to prepa, which is like the sort of preparatory so that you can get into the grande école, like you're talking about, right? So your like future and career in France is set because we're like, he might not want to stay in France. So why spend 2 years working his butt off in one subject that he's not even sure he wants to do? Like, if that's not like, if this is not the place he wants to stay. And so it's kind of led to a lot of really like interesting and I think uncomfortable conversations sometimes where like it's reminding me that I'm not from here and that even though we've been here for 15 years, my kid might still not follow the same path that the people that have been raised in the culture with him are going to follow because of who their parents are or because like they've just decided like this is the path that I want to take because they've made their own decisions for themselves. Like it's not the decisions that my kid at this point, a year and a half for making that decision wants
But
to.
I think that that goes back to him being a third culture kid. Like a lot of kids that are raised in one system, neither them nor their parents have any idea of there being other opportunities. They just assume that in other countries they have their own separate systems, and you don't really cross.
Right.
So I don't like my stepchildren have no no interest whatsoever in going to school outside of the country. Whereas my daughter cannot wait to get her butt back to Germany to go to university there. And she will not even, she's not even considering, we signed her up to take the pre-sat, uh, um, just because she could this year. And we're like, well, let's see what it's like. That way, you know, next year when you need to take it. She's like, I need to take the SATs because I'm going back to Germany. So I think it's kind of the beauty of raising third culture kids. They know they have the all the information at their fingertips, not just a hey, I heard somebody talk about it, so let me Google it in painstaking ways. They speak the language of all the other countries that they consider. They or if not, they know they're going to have to study that language. So they probably are self-motivated enough to do that too, because the reason they even consider going into another culture is because they feel comfortable switching cultures already. And and I think that that's the beauty of being a third culture kid, as well as a little bit of a curse for the parent, because if you like to have your kid stay close, and they're going to be like, no, I want to go to school. And in my case, it was almost 8,000 kilometers away. I'm like, great. So wait, it's a half hour from the house in the Netherlands, or 8,000 kilometers in Chicago. I'm gonna head to Chicago. My
Right.
parents are like, okay, I guess we'll see you when we see you.
Totally. And I think it's also, and we talked about how we're going to have an episode coming up with interviewing the kids because I also imagine that it's kind of a curse in the sense that, um, like you said, like they're our kids are self-motivated enough to figure out what they want to do. And it may be different than the path that their friends are taking or that, we want them to take. But I also think that part of the curse of it is the pressure, and I'm saying pressure like in quotes because I don't think Owen has taken this pressure on consciously. I think he carries the weight and just isn't conscious of that he's carrying this weight. Like I said, like I ask him questions and he's just like, meh, right? Like he's doing the formulation in his head, but he knows on some level that I don't know the answers to those questions, right? That I can't guide him in the same way that other parents can guide their kids. Um, and so then I either have to annoy him by asking questions, have to embarrass him by asking those questions to his advisor, right? And he has to sit there and listen to me ask those questions, or I have to do the research, or he's going to have to do that and tell me. And I think like I don't want to put that extra pressure on him to feel like he has to have all the answers so that he can come and tell me. But I know having worked in like a hospital setting in the US with a lot of immigrant families where one parent in particular, where the child had to be the translator for the parent. And because the child was born there and the child spoke the language better and the child was, um, in the system and understood how things worked. And it does. I think it does put, again, whether consciously or unconsciously, feel like, oh, you know, carries a little extra weight for them as third culture kids to be like, okay, like I know more than my parent does, right? It's like a little bit of a different dynamic. And if we've been talking about it a lot in the last couple of weeks, like since we went back to school, um, where I said to him, like, I don't know what you know. So if you don't have that information, like that's why I'm asking you all these questions. if you don't have the information, that's fine. Then I'm going to go get the information somewhere else. But I need you to know I'm going to go get the information from somewhere else because I don't want to come and tell you what I've learned that you already know. And then you're like, duh, mom, I already know that. Because that's what, right? Like that's what a teenager is going to do. And so we've been having a lot of really conscious conversations about that. And I know you and Franzia have too, because like she did spend that year in Germany and got to see what it was like and was away from you and got to also, have that independence and experience what education is like there and also know that things are different than when you were in Germany and you had to do it. So there's probably things that she knows that you don't know because you don't know what you don't know and I don't know what I don't know until I'm confronted with it.
I
Um,
think the independence part is huge overseas, much more than I honestly. I think part of why I really enjoyed college here, and um, as opposed to university there. So I don't know. I don't think I've talked about this before, but the first time I came to college in the United States was when I was 16 on a one semester scholarship that the college happened to give to students from my high school every once in a while. And I had won one of those scholarships, came over for the fall semester in when I was in 11th grade. And I was kind of taken by the hand. You know, you have your advisor who was responsible for all the international students. They're like, okay, you should take freshman rhetoric and what math course would you like? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you want to? Oh, I'm not really sure. I'm 16 years old. And then so they ended up putting me into finite math, which was the first time I really enjoyed math because it was actually applied, as opposed to in Germany where it's just here's your theoretical stuff and
yeah.
let's do some calculus because at some point you might want to calculate the intervals at which the daisy blooms while taking into consideration the sun and the winds. I don't know, but I
Totally.
love the
I'm
finite
married to
math.
a physicist and an astrophysicist who is a math and physics. Yeah, I get you. I hear you.
So I was like, oh my God, this
And
is
he's a
something.
theorist, right? He's like, so he's constantly like, thing, and I'm like, bring it down to earth. Tell me what I need to know.
There's the star up there that's in a constellation which we can calculate. Anyway, so I really enjoyed that and took some business classes, and that's how I figured out that's what I wanted to do. But then I had to go back to Germany, and everything was all theoretical again. And from the US back then, I had selected my AP classes just on a whim, and but in the US, I was taken by the hand and followed through. Then I played around for a year after high school and studied a little sports and English in a different track, like not at one of the great schools where I had to pass the test, and but at a state university, basically, and that was fun. But it was so I went there and I was like, okay, so what do I need to do? Well, here's a catalog of all the classes. Okay, which one do I have to take? Well, you pick. You just have to make sure you take all those classes. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if you don't pass it the second time, you have to change your field of study because you only get two attempts. You only get two attempts for your high school diploma, and you only get two attempts for every single class at university. And if you don't pass the one that's required, you're going to have to change and start anew. Um, but anyway, I came back here. I love the whole having an advisor, even as a senior in college, going to my advisor and saying, hey, I made it through accounting 1, 2, and 3, and now I have no idea what they're talking about anymore. And I just got 2 Fs, and I should. He's like, well, if you're too stupid, then you have to withdraw. Okay, but accounting is my minor. He's like, oh,
Right.
I already signed off on that. So I have an accounting minor, and I never finished the intermediate accounting 2 class. Like, you're a month out from
If you're
graduation.
listening from Astros University, don't
Uh,
just
well,
ignore
it was a month out from graduation. There was nothing anybody could do anymore. So I got a W for wonderful or something, or withdrawal, either one. but it was much more like, oh well, here, talk to this person. And in Germany, it's figure
Yeah.
out your way. You're an adult. You're 18, 19 years old. Go.
Well,
And
that's what like, when Owen talks about prepa, like this preparatory, it's all about weeding people out, right? So if you are going to go into a scientific field and you want to do it in the way that's going to set you for life by going to a grande école, you go to prepa and it's 2 years of just studying that one subject, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes on Saturdays. And like then it's like then you're golden after those 2 years, right? And you like your third year of university is normal university, but like it's like easy from the people I've talked to because you've just worked your butt off for 2 years on studying one thing, and then you get to go study all these other things that are interesting, like that, right? Like kind of as like a hobby because you're like you've already gotten your degree, but you're like have to do that extra, the like the prereq, like or not, they're not prereqs, right? But the like requirements for graduation, and so, but it's really about weeding people out. It's like how hard can we push you until you crack and quit or did like figure or crack, have a breakdown and then come back with like, stronger. And a lot of people, the idea is to get the people who are not cut out for it to leave so that they can have the best and brightest going into these like jobs that set them for life.
well,
And
but also I think it's not just the best and brightest going into the jobs that helps them set for life, but it's also having the best and brightest take up the tax money that it costs to send them to university.
oh, for sure. For sure. Because
Because
these
you
prep.
don't have, yeah, because you can't just make your rich daddy pay for everything like you do in the US.
Yeah. And I feel like that, I mean, that's something they learn through the entire system here, right? Is how to be like discouraged and, and how to be weeded out. Because in like, and we've talked about this before, you and I, like when they take their brevet here, or like their end of middle school exam, it's like based on what their grades are up until that point, and then this exam. And like that's going to determine if you go the general track or if you go the like professional track to a vocational school. And it's really hard to switch from one to the other. So if you don't work your butt off to do well on that test, you like your path is going to be different than the kids who do. So there's always this like pressure, pressure, pressure um, to weed out the weaker links. And I hate that. Like I don't believe that any kid, I believe that every kid is born genius and the love of learning is taught out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
I would
so
agree
I
with that.
truly believe that if you had the right teachers and the right mentors and were supported in the right way, every single kid could get into whatever the Harvard is of the country that they live in. Um,
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I would say there's definitely a lot of nurture over nature too.
yeah. Yeah. But I think like so much of it is like telling kids from day one, like, you're smart, you're not, you're like, you're good at this, you're bad at that. Like, right. Which I think happens so much more here than it does in the States, especially now. And
Yep.
certainly, like, like we're going to hold your hand as you fill out this form. Like, could you imagine, like, French bureaucrat being like, we're going to hold your hand? Like, I make them hold my hand because I'm like, please. Like, I'm just a silly, stupid American who's never done this before. You would be my savior, right? I appeal to their ego, but like, it's not something that's offered to me for walking into that office.
Right. Well,
Um,
especially not you anymore, a
yeah,
child maybe.
but
Yeah.
it's very much like the system here is so set in stone of like this is how we do it, and it's about creating a working class and a rich class and a like academic class and a right. And Um, and so yeah, like but it's only if you stay in France was my point, right? It's only if you decide that you're going to stay in the system. And you can take what you've learned and go someplace else, which is what you did, and have this, like take a different path and have a successful life. And like I just it's in it again, like I said, when we were talking about third culture kids, I think that's such a gift to third culture kids. Like you said it's such a gift to third culture kids to like have that openness, to have that curiosity, to have the opportunity, so that they can look at the system and be like, I'm consciously making a choice to stay in this system because I know that other choices exist.
But even if your kid is not, and this is, you and I obviously know this because we have moved several times. But even if you're listening to this podcast and you're not in a different culture, you are not currently raising a third culture kid, you can still have them think like third culture kids by opening up different opportunities for them and telling them, hey, this is something you can do. And these days, for listeners in the United States, these days a lot of schools in Europe take American students with their high school diploma. They get like another year of catching up on whatever they would need to know. A lot of the classes are even in English. They changed the system now that you have a bachelor's and a master's degree, which kind of correlates with the United States system. And I'm sure France has some private schools that do that too. And it might be a good idea to look into, especially if you're struggling and finding a school that your kid really would like to go to in the United States.
Yeah.
So even if you're not raising a third culture kid, you can open that opportunity to your kid to become, or to at least think like a third culture kid, and then maybe become a third culture adult by going to school somewhere else.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's exactly what I was trying to get at, right? Is that our kids our kids didn't have we didn't have to consciously teach it to them. But there's intentionality there and there's so many opportunities. And at least here in France, I would say a lot of the schools are there are a lot of private schools here, and it's a fraction of the cost of US public schools, of US public schools, right? It's like a fraction of the cost of state universities. Um, but also, I think definitely do your research, like find people who have kids there and do it early on, right? Like don't wait to those last moments. Like start talking about it in sophomore year, junior year, like before it becomes like um they're trying to get everything done while studying for the SATs, while taking their AP courses, while this, while that, while learning how to drive, all the things. Um
Well, especially for Germany, you do need a bunch of AP courses. That's what my daughter is currently struggling with, because otherwise her high school diploma will not be equivalent to a German high school diploma. Because generally, if you if you take a lot of just whatever the minimum classes required are in the United States without any AP classes, your diploma is going to be worth a 10th grade degree in Germany. And that's what we were told at the university last year. So she is currently struggling to get all of her AP classes in so that she might have a chance to go straight into university there without having to take any extra classes. But again, there are different options at different schools. And it is, like Marissa just said, it is worth looking into early. If you are interested, please send us an email at cultureclashparenting at gmail.com, and definitely like and follow us on Instagram. We now have a Facebook page too. Yay! You can find us anywhere you want on Culture Clash Parenting, and like and share, and definitely send us your questions, and we would be happy to talk about this more on the podcast or talk to you privately if you're looking to send your kid overseas for some time.
Yeah. And if you are somebody who studied abroad, or even if it was a semester abroad or a year abroad, we'd love to hear your experiences as well. And if you're raising a third culture kid, and they've already gone through this phase of life, We'd love to
Oh,
hear
come
your
help us.
experiences. Come help us because, yeah, we haven't gotten to the end yet. Like the light at the end of the tunnel is there. Um, but yeah, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.